Welcome to the Exam Room Podcast, brought to you by the Physicians Committee. Hello, I'm the weight loss champion, Chuck Carroll, joined today by another weight loss success. This is somebody who was overweight, battling diabetes, had heart disease, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, desperately out of shape, and all around he says he was just miserable. But the tide has turned. He is living a new life, much healthier, much lighter. And oh, by the way, he's got a couple of cookbooks now to prove it. He's built an empire for himself under the name of Shane and Simple Cooking. With that, we welcome Shane Martin to the exam room for the first time. Shane, look at you holding up that.
Sorry. How did that get there? My bad.
I was warned about you. I was warned about you. You're a funny guy and a shameless self-promoter. Welcome to the show, Shane.
What's up, Chuck?
Good to see you. Good to see you. And for those of the audience, the exam roomies who are listening to the podcast, he shamelessly held up a copy of his cookbook, Baking Vegan Bread at Home. Hold that up one more time so everybody can see that.
Yeah, I would love to. Look at that.
We're going to be talking about that. I have not seen just a vegan bread cookbook before, so I feel like you have that market cornered a little bit.
I think so. I mean, I like to think I do, but the interesting thing is a lot of bread is accidentally vegan anyway. So I had to it's surprising. I had to get creative to go dig and find non-vegan breads. So,
before we get into your story, let's actually start with the cookbook since we're here. Are you a bread guy? Because ordinarily people don't associate bread and weight loss together, and here you are, this tremendous health success with a bread cookbook.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think no, I'm not a bread guy. So, when we were chatting earlier, like when the publisher first reached out and they found me on Pinterest or something, and they said, "Oh, we got this bread cookbook we want you to do," and they said, "So you're a bread guy, obviously." And I just looked at them and I said, "Oh," because I don't know about you, Chuck, but like when people are if you're something you want to do, and they say, "Can you do this?" The answer is always yes, and then learn how to do it, And so they just said, "You're a bread guy, right?" And I went, "Well, I love bread, and so I guess it qualifies me to maybe learn how to make it." And so a lot of the cookbook is just me learning. And but yeah, I mean, I for one, when I first went on my journey after I watched Forks Over Knives, I was always told potatoes and bread and pastas were the enemy. And then after watching that, I was like, oh, it's just a matter of the type of bread. So I will tell you, I ate a lot of bread and pasta on my weight loss journey. So I think it's a health food. So
I think that you have just made 99% of America sit up and sing, my friend. I ate a lot of bread and pasta and potatoes on my weight loss journey. I don't even think on this show those words have been uttered.
Oh, well, it worked for me. I mean,
so carb it up, baby. Carb it up.
I love a good carb coma. So.
All right, let's talk about this journey of yours. I mean, as we said at the top of the show, diabetes, heart disease, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, way out of shape. As you said, just miserable. What was life like for you back in the day, Shane?
Well, I didn't grow up overweight. I mean, I was an athlete, played sports ever since I could walk. I actually went to college on a football scholarship. And then when I got out of college, moved to Nashville to do music is when I just started slowly gaining weight. And then probably back in 2005, 2006 is where I really started to go, oh, it's getting out of hand. And actually went and saw a doctor. We were living in North Carolina and had a first physical I'd had in probably 7 or 8 years. And he sent me a letter in the mail that said, here's your numbers. And they were terrible. I think my cholesterol was 400, something like that, or a little over. I was pre-diabetic, fatty liver, verging on heart disease. And he said, I need to see you. We got to get this under control. And I didn't go back. I just pretended like I never saw the letter. And, because if you ignore it, it doesn't exist. Right. So this went on for a few more years. And then I just started to get miserable. Like it started to become noticeable, like exhausted. We had 4 children at the time before we had our 5th. And I mean, just wasn't good. And then probably around my late 30s, I started getting staph infections that wouldn't heal. And it was just terrible. I was literally miserable all the time, miserable. And I remember one morning, just kind of at the end of my rope, and looked in the mirror, and I just was bloated and my face was red, and it's like, I can't do this anymore. And so it just was just miserable is the only way I know to describe it. And so I just was, like I said, I had to do something. And I had tried diets before where I'd, done keto and Atkins and would lose weight or count fat grams and lose it rather quickly. But then the minute and I'm not a moderation person, I'm kind of a black or white, all in, all out kind of thing. And the minute I would kind of fall off the wagon, the weight would come back fast, and I'd usually put on more. So I was just miserable.
Lots to unpack there, but you said the minute that you fell off the wagon, and that is so similar to, as I always like to describe it, no different than, trying to quit smoking or stopping drinking or using drugs,
Sure.
whatever the vice may be. You fall off the wagon and it's a hard fall. And it seems like you just keep on tumbling. Did you consider yourself to be addicted to a lot of these unhealthy foods you were eating?
Yeah, I don't think I ever used the word addicted, but I was always a foodie. I mean, I loved to eat. And I think too, after my mom died back in 2000, um, I was battling depression. So I'm an emotional eater. Um, and I'm the type, if I would fall off the wagon, I was like, it's just ruined anyway. So why try to get back on? So that would, kind of go into that dark place. But I guess addiction is the best word for it. I think, I guess what defines an addiction is when you walk by it and you just can't help but you instinctively grab it. And that's what I would do. If food was out, I was going to eat it, and so it just got to a point where it just consumed who I was.
Let's talk about your diet because you were born and raised in Mississippi. You're a Southern boy. We obviously can hear that in your accent, and I love it. I'm not
Wait,
quite from.
I don't have an accent. You
No,
have it.
not at all. You sound like you're from New York. That's what I was referring to. I'm so sorry.
Yeah. Sorry.
Um,
That's okay.
right. Born and raised in Mississippi, Manhattan, and but that is kind of at the heart of what is unfortunately known as the obesity belt. And what was the standard diet, or what was your diet like growing up? I know that you said that you didn't really struggle with your weight, but you were also really active. You were playing football, and I'm sure other sports
Hmm.
as well. But what was the typical Shane menu looking like back in the day?
Yeah, well, interesting because growing up in the rural South, eating out was not something we did, because my parents had blue collar jobs. My dad was a highway patrolman. My mom, worked for the state government, and so, but eating out was not a big. So we didn't eat out a lot, if ever. But growing up, my grandparents, we grew up right down the road from my grandparents, and we ate a lot of vegetables. There was always fried chicken, and every casserole had cheese and mayonnaise in it. And there was always some type of beef or pork product in the fridge. But a lot of our spread was always butter beans, black eyed peas, um, turnip greens, collard greens. But here in the South, everything is seasoned with lard, or pork is a seasoning here. So you always had we always had that spread, and it was always a big part of my plate. Corn, potatoes, we love those things, but they were, any of the healthy aspects of those things were kind of negated by what was added. But so growing up, it was a lot of eating those things, and like I said, the fried chicken. But again, we weren't allowed to just come in and gorge ourselves. I mean, at the meals we would gorge, and there was always bacon and eggs for breakfast. But again, when you're active and you're eating right at 3 meals a day, and you're not sitting in the house, you know, watching Netflix or something, I mean, every summer we were outside playing, or we played baseball during rec league, so we were always moving. And I think that had a lot to do with it. But, as you get older and you get settled and you're not doing all those things, and you have to work jobs, and then eating out becomes convenience, and then you're doing more of that. And so that's where I really started to see a lot of the weight come on, in my early 20s. And but as far as the diet, it was your typical, I don't even say it was the standard American diet. Like I said, there was definitely like pork or beef and things like that, but there was definitely a healthy spread of, like I said, butter beans, corn, collard greens, watermelon, stuff like that, because my grandparents grew a lot of our produce.
Did your eating habits change as you became more sedentary in your 20s as well, or were you still eating those same things, but you just weren't playing rec league ball anymore? You weren't on the football field, any of that.
Well, I still played a lot of softball, with corporate leagues and stuff like that. But I think the thing that got me is, especially when I moved to Nashville, is moving to a place that had amazing eateries, and you move from not eating out a lot to eating out a lot, hanging out with your friends, doing gigs, and you're always eating bar food, onion rings and burgers and stuff like that. And, I think I became more sedentary because, I was trying to make it in music as a musician, but also you got to work a day job. So you work a day job, you go gig at night, you're getting up early, you're going to bed late, you're eating bar food, you're grabbing it when you can. So you're not really focusing on what you're eating. And the last thing you want to do is go to a bar and grab a salad. Salads weren't appealing to me. And, and so, so I would say it probably became more sedentary because you're just tired all the time because you're burning the candle at both ends. And so you sit around and all you want to do is eat, watch television when you have a moment. And it gradually became like that, and exercising or any of that had no place in my schedule.
Did they throw in free beer at a lot of these gigs? I'm hoping that they would at least cover your meal and give you something to drink.
You generally, so depending on where you went, you typically got a discount on the beer. So, and Nashville had a lot of good breweries. So, you can't go do a gig and not, and then we didn't like that ultra crap. So,
I like your style. Yeah, man. So I'm assuming that you moved to Nashville. You were pursuing a career in country music. Is that right?
Yes. When I first moved to Nashville, I moved there to be I wanted to be a songwriter and had hopes of being a contemporary Christian artist. But I ended up getting hired as a guitar player, because I'd been playing guitar since I was 5 or 6 years old. So I ended up going out with different country acts and Christian acts as a sideman, and then started doing sessions playing in the studio on people's records. And had a couple of publishing deals, one with Sony and then one with Pamplin. And so, making a meager living, but was scraping up enough money between gigs and stuff to survive and not having to work a day job for a little while. So, but
who are some of the artists that you worked with that we might be familiar with?
Well, this was back in the early 90s. So, I was on the Rebecca St. James tour. I was with a group called LaRue. I've done gigs with Linda Davis, who toured with Reba McEntire. My big gig was when Shadazy first came out, group of sisters. And
Shadazy, Little Goodbyes. Yes, sir.
Yes. So I was there. I played guitar on their first tour. So.
No way.
Yeah. So that was fun. We had a blast. They were new, and so we were just touring around doing gigs. So yeah, so I was their first guitar player.
Oh my gosh, I had no idea. That's a fun little story, man. I love this show. You just learn these little interesting nuggets about people. And Little Goodbyes, like that is a funny song, man. Like,
yeah.
If you guys aren't familiar with it, definitely open up your Spotify and check that out. Little Goodbyes, or just pop it in YouTube after we're through with this conversation here. That's awesome. You didn't play on that particular studio session, did you?
No, I didn't play on that record. I just it was kind of funny how that whole thing happened. It was through a friend of a friend, and they needed an acoustic player. And a friend of mine that I gigged with said, "Hey, there's this guy, Shane. He doesn't, So anyway, I got a call, and I was actually in a session at a studio, and they brought the CD over, and they said, "Oh, by the way, here's the album." And I think it had like 13 songs on it, the first one. And they said, "Just learn the album, and tomorrow we'll call out 2 or 3. That's how the audition went. So I left that session that night, went and learned the album that night. And the next day we showed up and they said, "We're going to do these 3 songs from the album." And that's kind of how that happened. So
seems like a pretty quick turnaround. Like, here's the CD and go at it. They didn't send you any sheet music. They literally just said, "Hey,
Nobody reads music in Nashville hardly, man. So it's just learn it and we'll see you tomorrow." So I was like, went home, learned it that night. So
All right, all right. Well, you're piquing my interest as the old music DJ in me, but let's go ahead and switch back and talk about your health a little bit more. So, you moved to Nashville. How quickly did you start to notice that your health was starting to deteriorate a little bit?
um, I don't know that I would have said my health was deteriorating. I would say what I noticed quicker was when I first moved to Nashville, I was 20 or 21, and I was very svelte and weighed, I think, 189, 190, somewhere around in there. And then when I got married 5.5 years later, I weighed 240 pounds. So um, quite a significant turnaround. I think when I saw my wedding photos, that's when I was like, because it's like you don't really, you're never as objective with yourself as everyone else is, and so that was kind of the aha moment. And you would have thought that things would have gotten better, but they didn't. They just kind of went downhill from there.
What were some of the first things that you started to notice other than, wow, my pants are tighter, I'm looking a little fluffier? Like, at what point did you say, man, I got to go to the doctor? Like, this isn't right.
Yeah, that was probably a few years later down the road. So I got married in 99. We moved to Charlotte, left Nashville, moved to Charlotte in '05. And I think around '07 is when, and it was actually, I was working at a church in Charlotte, and the pastor I was working with, he was 20 years older than me. I was in my early 30s, but he was 20 years older than me. And he biked all the time, swam. And he finally told me, he pulled me aside and said, "You're going to have a physical." Like, he just put it out there. And so that's when I went to the doctor. And I said, I probably wouldn't have gone until he told me. And he said, "Tomorrow, I want to see that you made the appointment." Like, he was holding me accountable. And so I went and did a whole blood work thing. And when I got the reality of the, the blood work, that's when it really hit home, when you can see it on paper.
With the cholesterol and things like that were
Yeah.
popping up. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, that's a tough one. But you said, you know, y- you weren't ready kind of to face it, so you ignored it for a while. Was there a fear that because, you're a family man at that point, you've got all of these obligations, like I don't have time for this. I got to keep going. And what was behind the decision to ignore it at that point?
Yeah, I would love to tell you that my first thought was, "Oh, I can't deal with this. I've got to support my family. I've got to take care of them." But honestly, it was just selfishness. It's like I don't want to deal with it, because if I deal with, I mean, and it's pride and it's arrogance. It's like nobody wants to be told they're fat and out of shape and unhealthy. And when you're hit with that reality, it was about self-preservation. And everybody said, "Well, why didn't you go back?" And I'm like, well, it's always easier said than done, but it's like if I don't acknowledge it, it doesn't exist. And so, and two, I mean, I think some of it was laziness too. It means I'm going to have to change a lot of things. So I would love to tell you that it was out of this, I got to push forward, I got to take care of business, I got a family. But the proper perspective would have been, I've got to get this under control because I've got a family. And it was completely self-centered, selfishness and pride that I didn't take care of it then. So it was just like, I don't want to deal with it.
Yeah, man. I mean, you can call it self-centered, but honestly, I think that that's a pretty normal reaction because change is the hardest daggone thing
Sure.
at the beginning. I mean, the hardest thing. And I'm sure you
Sure.
had your routines at that point and you just like to kind
Hmm.
of wake up and know what the day is going to greet you with and you go through it and that's just the way that you get through and you manage your stress and you just, you got it
Sure.
all laid out, man. But if you rock the boat, that ain't the easiest thing in the world. Like everything has to change. You got to establish, new routines and who's got time for all that?
Yeah. Well, and I think that was definitely, yeah, your routine is upended. But again, for me, it's like when you're hit with the truth. I mean, and I think this is the thing. It doesn't matter whether it's eating or health. The bottom line is truths are not like lies or fallacy, because the truth very seldom doesn't offend. I mean, but I think, but something that doesn't offend in a good way will never lead to change. And so when you see that what you're doing is not good, that just it rocks your world. And so you either just pretend that it doesn't exist, or you figure out. And you're right, taking that first step is the hardest thing. It's just, I remember my wife saying one time, um, years ago, before we'd moved to Charlotte, like, when people say, you have everybody that on December 31st, they just gorge and gorge because January 1st is the new day. I'm going to start a diet tomorrow. And my wife, she was still at Belmont at the time, but we were sitting around with my mom and dad. And I still remember the conversation. She said, people say that all the time. The proper response is, I'm starting it now, you know?
Hmm.
And I just thought, wow, that's like, we all do this. Tomorrow is a new day. I'm going to start, but it's like, no, let's make the new day today. And I think for me, that's kind of how I have to operate. Like, if I don't move on it now and I go, oh, I'll get it tomorrow, it's so much easier to kick the can down the road. But
Yeah. I got you, man. Let's back that up again. I love what you said about truth very rarely doesn't offend. You
mhm,
mentioned that your cholesterol was somewhere in the ballpark of 400, maybe a little bit higher. What was your
yeah,
blood pressure like those days?
I think it was like 153 over 106 resting.
Ooh, okay. All right. That's up
Yeah,
there. That's up there.
yeah, yeah. And I never will forget the time that was after a physical. And then we were in Winn-Dixie, the grocery store. We were living in Opelika, Alabama, and I was with my kids. My daughter is like 11 or 12. And I went over to the arm machine, just, because the doctor was wrong. He couldn't have been right on that. So I go up to the little machine over by the pharmacy section and test it, and it blows up, and it was like 153 over 108 or something. And my daughter, my oldest daughter, who was 12 at the time, she goes, Daddy, I looked at her and said, don't tell your mother. That was the first thing I said. So when your 12-year-old realizes that's not good,
Hmm.
then that was too an aha moment. Like, oh, my 12-year-old, who's not supposed to know that blood pressure is, she realizes. And so my blood pressure was around that 153, 106 was the last official. So not good.
Well, let's put some more truth on the table, and let me couch this question by saying the day that I was prescribed blood pressure medication, before I went and filled the prescription, I went to the drive-through and got a double cheeseburger from Burger King. So you happened to be in Winn-Dixie when you broke the machine and alarmed your daughter. What went in your shopping cart after that?
I would say that it was probably, there was always Fruity Pebbles. There was always going to be, whole milk, uh, bacon, sausage, canned biscuits, you know,
So,
vegetables that my wife got because that's what she ate. But I'm
right,
not, I'm not going to touch that stuff. So
right. Southern staples.
hamburger meat, hot
Yeah,
dogs.
I got you.
And
Canned
not the
biscuits.
good hot dogs. It was always, wasn't those brine hot dogs. We couldn't afford those. It was always, all the mixture of everything left over.
Mm-hmm. I know the kind. I know the kind very well. I grew up eating those, and I wouldn't even cook them. Grandma would just give them to us raw. Say, "Here, eat this." I was like,
And wrap them in white bread. We didn't even get a bun.
"That's right." Hey, sometimes to make it gourmet, there was a slice of American cheese wrapped around it. If there was a little
Oh,
extra money,
wow.
store brand
Yeah.
American cheese, you betcha.
There you go.
Yeah,
Yeah.
man, that's good stuff. And now it just, I don't know. I look at it very differently, Shane, and I'm sure you
I
do
do
too.
too, man. Yes, absolutely. Golly.
So what was the bottoming out point? I mean, you mentioned looking at the mirror, seeing the red face, all of this bloating around. Like you say that you were miserably out of shape. Um, Talk to us like when you would go up a flight of stairs, was that challenging, or did you try to hop on a treadmill one day and realized, oh my God, I feel like I'm dying? What happened?
I think it was just the day to day. Like, I was coaching my son's baseball team one year, and um, couldn't run around the bases, make it past second base without just wearing down, and trying to play church softball and just realizing I couldn't get to the ball as quick. I mean, just a lot of things like that. And I remember at one of the practices of my son, we were doing bat around, and I was just kind of tossing the ball, and one of the kids hit the ball, and he just hit a slow grounder back to me to the mound, and it was not rolling that fast. And when I went down to scoop it up, it hit a rock and hit me in the shin. And then started swelling and it got infected and it just started spreading up my leg. And I was like, okay, this is not good. And had to go to the doctor, get put on antibiotics. And I think when it hit me, I went to the doctor and they had to do this whole procedure of, opening the wound and all this. And I got put on antibiotics. And I went to Target to get my prescription because it was right across the parking lot. And I could hardly walk. The pain was so bad. And the last thing I wanted to do was get on one of those little motorized carts. And I did. And when I drove by the mirror and saw what I looked like a big walrus on that thing. And I went up to the pharmacy and I never will forget it. I couldn't get in, and there was a line, and I had to put it in reverse and had no clue that thing had the beeping sound. And so I'm backing up and it's going beep, beep, and I'm bumping into things and I'm like, this is terrible. And it just was humiliating. And it was, I was ready to get my prescription and get out of there. And I didn't even drive the thing to my car. I got my prescription, left that cart there, and I hobbled and grabbed me a cart and used it as balance and got to my car, got home, put my leg up, started taking the antibiotics. And I think that was middle of the week, and the pain eased off by the end of the week. And I was getting up, getting ready on a Sunday morning, that following Sunday, to go to church to work. And I went in that morning, looked in the mirror, my face was red and I was bloated. And I got on the scale, which I'd avoided the scale like the plague, and I'd hit like 289, 290 pounds. And I thought, oh my gosh, I am 10. Like, if I keep going, if I'm alive in 6 months, there's no doubt I will be 300 pounds, like 300 pounds. And that's when I just was like, I can't do it anymore. I cannot do it anymore. And I don't know what to do. Like, I've exhausted everything. And that was the bottoming out. And I had seen a friend of mine, Thad Beatty, who was on a Facebook ad for Iron Man. And I thought, man, Thad has lost a ton of weight because he was always kind of a chunky guy and another musician. And I called a mutual friend of ours because I didn't have Thad's number. And I said, man, I saw Thad's interview. He looked incredible, said he lost 80 pounds and he's doing Iron Man. Like, what happened? And he said, dude, Thad went vegan. And I went, no, well, I'm not doing that. And he said, dude, just go watch Forks Over Knives. And this was like 2 weeks before my 40th birthday back in 2013, I think. And that Sunday night, my wife and I sat down and watched the documentary. And the next day I went cold turkey. And rest is history.
Yeah, man. I mean, a couple of things there. Number one, isn't it funny how we can kind of put blinders up to what our reality is until you get that glance in the mirror that one day when you just
Mhm.
happen to see yourself on that little buggy driving by and like, wow, is that really me? Whereas, when you're putting on your pants every day, and I'm not sure what your waist size was. Mine was a 66, which to me today looks absolutely enormous, but back in the day was completely normal.
Yeah, I
And
was a
I,
40. I got to be a 40 in the waist.
right, right. And I'm sure like a 40 waist pair of pants to you today looks awfully big compared to what it is that you're used to putting on. But
Yeah.
you didn't see that at the time. Isn't it funny how we have the blinders on like that?
Oh, it's crazy. And that's why I said we used to say when people hold you accountable, we need accountability because we are never as objective with our shortcomings and our sins and our faults as everyone outside of us is. And I tell people all the time, it's like this house we've been renovating for 2 years. I mean, it was a monstrosity. It was 100-year-old, you know, craftsman type of house. And it's like we've been in it so long and lived in it when we had walls ripped out, and we've become so numb to the progress, which we know things have changed, but we're just like, we got to be done. We got to be done. This is terrible. And we have people come and they go, oh my gosh, I can't believe the transformation. It's because you become so anesthetized. And that's what happens. We just get so anesthetized to where we are and who we are that if we're really wanting to change, we're really going to have to become humble enough and and it's hard, but just inviting people in and go, help me. And I think that's what happened for me.
So let me ask you this. You watch Forks Over Knives and you make the change overnight. How difficult of a transition was that for you? I know that you didn't eat out a lot. Clearly you're shopping at the grocery store, so y'all are cooking, but that's an awfully big change in the way that you have been preparing food versus what it is that you're going to be doing moving forward. What was the most challenging part of that for you?
Well, I think what was interesting is that I'd always cooked a lot anyway. So, um, but I think the biggest challenge, and I tell people when I watched Forks Over Knives, and I just that day I became the biggest Rip Esselstyn fan. I mean, I just and I got really into that when he's doing Engine Two. But I think what changed me about Forks Over Knives is when I watched it, as I felt like it busted every food myth that we had heard. Because my dad was battling type 2 diabetes and some heart issues at the time, but he was doing, like his doctor said, you got to go on a low carb. And he lost a lot of weight, but he never could like completely get rid of the diabetes. And I kept trying to tell him it's not your carbs, you're still eating fatty stuff, and so when I watch Forks Over Knives and they're just debunking all these myths, and I'm seeing they're taking these patients and they're cooking pasta and they're cooking potatoes and corn, and Dr. McDougall comes on talking about that, and I see all this food they're eating. I was telling my wife, I said, I could do that. I was like, they're not, that doesn't look like deprivation at all. And so when I realized, oh, I can eat potatoes, I can eat pastas. It's just, the whole grain or the whole wheat pastas and things like that. And so that didn't seem overwhelming because it just looked like, oh, remove the oil. Like that debunked all the myths about olive oil and coconut oil for me. And just remove the oils and cook. I think the big thing was, how do you cook without dairy and the cheeses? And you just go, oh, you don't need them, get rid of it. You're just going to have to readjust. And so anyway, I will say the first 2 weeks, I got up the first morning and I had oatmeal, like just had oatmeal and berries and fruit, and so I just started there, and that was simple, and just said, just eat oatmeal every morning, and then I would force myself to eat a salad for lunch, which I was not prone to eat salads, but I do tell people dinner was probably the first couple of weeks was a little difficult because food just tasted bland because we were cutting out a lot of the salt and all the oils and things like that, and learning how to shop again and how to read the labels, and and going from dairy to almond milk or soy milk, which in some ways wasn't that difficult because two of our children were born with dairy allergies and had eczema, and we had figured out that my wife had figured out that it was the dairy and the whey causing it. So they had been on soy milk since when they would go from breastfeeding, they went immediately from breastfeeding to soy milk or almond milk. So that was kind of an easy win in a lot of ways. But learning to cook and just realizing, oh, it's actually kind of simple. You just remove the bad stuff and you learn how to saute, with water or veggie broth as opposed to the oils. But after about 2 weeks, finding some underground communities and learning how to cook in a different method, um, things just kind of snowballed from there. Like, oh, wait a minute, we can eat soups and chili. We just make it this way. And so, finding Chef AJ um, and then when I realized I'm going to be okay, I found the Engine 2 diet book in a library there and checked it out. And when I was like making the desserts, like the chocolate cake and things like that, and learning how to use silken tofu and regular tofu, I just was going, I can't believe how much I eat. I mean, that was the thing. So there was a little bit of a learning curve, but I tell people you're probably eating more plant based than you realize. Just get the crap out of the corn, the beans, and the rice and the potatoes and enjoy them.
What was your motivation, or what did you tell yourself as far as like a grace period when you were just getting going in that? Because you're talking about, oh, well, this food tastes super bland, and it took a while for your taste buds to get acclimated to it. A lot of people will tap out after a day or two because they're like, they want food that has flavor. So,
Yeah.
how did you get over that particular hump? That's something that a lot of people struggle with, Shane.
Yeah, and I did. I think there was a couple of ways. Like I loved candy bars. So what I did is Andre just bought a ton of fruit, apples, bananas, grapes, oranges. And so what I would do if I had a sugar craving, I would go in and just crush bananas and apples. Like I would eat two or three apples and a couple of bananas because I'm like, hey, I mean, it's better than eating 2 Snickers bars, you know? So, and I started realizing I didn't bottom out, like, and my taste buds were still adjusting. But I mean, there definitely was this, you have to have the willpower. You know, you have to kind of set your mind. And I remember meeting a guy for lunch one day, and I ordered just a basic garden salad, and I did have some of the light Italian dressing. And part of me just wanted to go, well, I'll just order a burger today and it'll be okay. I'll get back on tomorrow. But I knew me, and I tell people that's the thing. You got to know you. But I think for me, what kind of got me over the hump was I remember after the first week, because I was so obese and was taking in so many calories. You know, you're talking about going from eating probably 7, 8,000 calories a day, 6, 7, 8,000 calories, to eating 2,500, 3,000 calories maybe, and you're cutting your calories in half. So right away in the first week, I think in the first week I lost like 8 pounds, maybe 11 pounds, just because
Mm.
I dropped in it, and I felt better. I still looked in the mirror and but I remember getting on the scale and going, oh my gosh. But I remember I'm like, I'm not starving, you know, I mean, and so after the second week, I think I dropped 19 pounds or total 19 pounds. But I would just see the results. And that's kind of what spurred me on, like, okay, this is working, obviously. And so I remember when it kind of hit for us, we made the Rip Esselstyn's that raise the roof lasagna with the sweet potatoes and the vegetables and the tofu and everything. And the first time we made it, within the first 3 weeks of us going plant based, you know, we just remember it being kind of bland because you weren't loading it with salt and cheese and stuff. But I remember we went on vacation with Andrea's mom and dad, probably 3 or 4 months after I started this, maybe 4 or 5 months later, we went to the beach. And one night we made dinner and we made that lasagna. And I remember they were going, yeah, this is not bad. It's a little bland, but Andrea and I are just inhaling it, going, oh my gosh, this is the best thing ever. And it's when we looked at each other, she goes, I just realized we taste this now. And it was like everything had been cleared. And it was like Andrea likes to say, it says that's when food became electric. It wasn't just, it wasn't numbed out and flavored with all the chemicals and the crap, but we tasted like, oh my god, like I hated tomatoes growing up, hated them. And then when my palate cleared, like I love, I'll make cashew mayo and sliced tomatoes and eat tomato sandwiches now. Like I love tomatoes. And so it was like, oh, I taste the orange of the carrot, I taste the red of the tomato, I taste the green of the kale. Like food just became electric after that. So I feel like there was definitely this period of where you just got to power through. But then it was like the switch just goes on, and it's just like I see the light.
Yeah, I love the way that you put that. The food just became electric. And you're talking about like man food here. Like, I know you're a sports guy. You're like me. We've got lasagna, we've got chili, we got potatoes, we got all kinds of delicious things that are happening there, which I'm sure is a far cry from what your original thought of being vegan actually meant, right?
Oh yeah. Oh dude. I mean, I tell everybody, and it always gets a good laugh, but I'm serious. It's like the thought of going vegan was um twigs and berries and eating bark and wheatgrass and not bathing. That was my caricature of it. You know, weak people not looking healthy, you know, and then it was the furthest cry from it when you start. And that's when I say, when I saw Rip Esselstyn climbing that light pole, or that pole in the firehouse, I was like, okay. And then I found Rich Roll, and I'm like, okay, myth busted, you know. And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
you know,
You don't strike me as being one of the twig vegan type of people. You're a man's man, damn it. So
that's right.
yeah, and don't you
Man
forget
food,
it,
baby.
people. So when did you really start to turn your passion and your health transformation into, well, you know what, before we get that, let me ask you about your numbers. How quickly did you see things like your cholesterol, your blood pressure, the pre-diabetes, all of those numbers start to improve as well?
So the first 3 months, I went from I went from 289 to 226, I think. So roughly about 60, 65, 50, 55, 60 pounds, somewhere in there. So I was in the 220s, high 220s, mid 220s. And that was in 3 months. And we decided to have a physical for life insurance. And I felt pretty confident. But for me, it was also a cornerstone moment because I was like, either this is going to work or it's just going to be another diet where I've lost a lot of weight. And I don't want to go on medication. And so the nurse came over to do the physical for our life insurance. My blood pressure right away was what I could see, and when she did it, it had gone in 3 months from 153 over 106, 107 to 126 over 75. And I was like real disappointed. She goes, "What are you talking about?" She goes, "That's excellent for the culture now, you know." And so I was thinking, well, gal, that is kind of a turnaround, you know, from 153 over 106. And so, but this was without no, I had not exercised in that 3 months. It was all diet related. So that was the first marker. And I was going, oh my gosh, that's crazy. And about a week or so later, we got an email with our numbers. And I was just kind of chomping at the bit. And my wife opened them first and she was just kind of smiling. My cholesterol had gone from over 400 to 199. So it had dropped below 200, which they would say, let's keep it, you know, doctors now say keep it below 200. So it had gone to 199 in 3 months. There was absolutely no trace of any type of blood sugar problem, diabetes, anything. And I actually had a doctor that went to our church come up to me and look at me when I was struggling with all this. And they told me, you need to go get checked because I can look at you and tell you're a full blown diabetic. I had the dark circles under my eyes, under my arms, frequent urination, staph infections that wouldn't heal. They said that is all symptomatic of diabetes. But again, I never got officially diagnosed with type 2. I had pre-diabetes, but I never got diagnosed with type 2, which is good because once you get diagnosed with it, you know, it feeds into everything once it's officially diagnosed. But there was no trace of anything like that, no fatty liver. I mean, nothing came up on the report as a concern. And so I was telling the nurse about my first physical with fatty liver and all that. She goes, "This is amazing." She said, "Because you don't have any of that." And so, so that's when I went, okay, I'm all in, like from there. And that's when it became like a passion. And so when I saw those numbers, I just became like a disciple and an evangelist for, you know, trying to speak into people's lives. And because people were watching my progress on my Facebook page, I had family reaching out constantly like, "What are you doing? Like, I need help." And when I would tell them, the first thing they're like, "Well, you know, you got to have your dairy and your meat for your protein. That's where it always goes." And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm really struggling with that, as you can tell." So
Yeah, yeah. You look straight emaciated, Shane. I'd be very careful if I were you.
yeah.
And it's not lost on me. Also, you said that when you were trying to curb that sweet tooth craving initially, you turned to bananas and apples, and you have the big carousel of both right behind you. So you still a banana apple guy?
Oh, yeah. I think those are the two main fruits. Like we love oranges. I love sumo oranges when they're in season. Oh, just I could crush those. I'll buy them at the grocery store and eat two on the way home. But a lot of apples and bananas, just going like we're cooking with them, making banana bread or eating them in oatmeal, and then apples. I just love to keep apples out because I'm like a horse. Like if you're gonna walk by and grab something, grab an apple. So but yeah, we keep a steady supply of apples and bananas.
So let's put a cap on this journey. So you go from sports guy growing up to musician to really just kind of struggling with your weight. It gets out of control. You go vegan. How in the world did this whole cooking thing? I know you said you've been cooking your whole life, but at what point does passion become career for you?
Yeah, so yeah, I always loved to cook, and when I started making these meals, when I kind of learned the little tricks, like using flax eggs and water to saute and things like that, I think for me, what I noticed about a lot of the recipes, one of the things I appreciated again about Rip Esselstyn and a lot of his recipes is they were simple, they were easy. But I also wanted to do something like I wanted to kind of find things that I related to growing up, like the mashed potatoes, the meaty recipes, cream corn, green beans, like how can I flavor those, keep them healthy? And meatloaf, I loved meatloaf growing up. And so it's like, so just learning how to create those flavors and things, like it became fun. Like it wasn't just following a recipe at that point, like what I had done when I cooked in the past for the family, but it was like, I'm a creative by nature. I'm a musician, I'm an artist, I'm a photographer now, so I'm a big picture guy. So just pulling things out and seeing what I can create. So that's kind of how it started. And I was creating things for the family, or I'd get online and find a cake recipe, and I'd figure out a way to make it healthy and not dense. And how can we keep all this, and, cookies or whatever. And so that's kind of how it started. But I just was like, man, I would love, or I'd see Dr. Esselstyn, or I'd see Dr. Barnard, like he was a huge influence for me. And just watching these guys speak, and I'm going, that's what I would love to do. I was like, you just become passionate about it. And so when I started cooking, my wife said, why don't you just kind of start a blog, and because we followed a lot of recipe blogs, but I had no clue how to make money at it. And it really kind of started as, just do it to kind of do your thing. And so, that's kind of where it started. And I just the kids were loving what I was making. My wife loved what I'm making. And I ended up I was probably cooking 85% of our meals. And just, I loved it. It just was fun. And so anyway, that's kind of how it started. And then my wife said, why don't you start a blog? And, I had no clue where to start. I got on WordPress, kind of learned how to throw a basic theme together, started following, just Googling some stuff. And that probably started in 2014, but I just kept hitting walls and couldn't figure out where to start. And then I'd see all these other blogs, and right out of the gate, you want it to look professional. You don't want it to look like you just started. But every podcast I listened to, every blog I followed that talked about building a food blog or a blog period said, just do something. And that was 2014. We changed the name of the blog 2 or 3 times. My wife's a graphic designer, so she was always redesigning something. And then we had moved back to Charlotte in 2015, I think, 2014, 2015. And I had a friend of mine I was talking to, lives in Colorado now. And he said, man, don't make this a generic food blog. He said, there's a ton of those out there. He said, put your story into it. It needs to really reflect who you are and your attitude. I'm kind of don't take myself too seriously, sarcastic kind of dude. It said you need that element in there, and people relate to that. And so he said, he said, we love what you do with your recipes when you've been to these, immersion days. And they said, you're just kind of a plain and simple guy. And I thought, because everybody has this idea that eating vegan and healthy is for the well-heeled elite, and it's pretentious. And so I thought, I'm not a pretentious dude. I'm pretty practical. And so once I thought that, my wife was out of town, and I called her and said, hey, what about the name Shane and Simple? And I said, the tagline I'm thinking is practical, not pretentious plant-based recipes. And that's just kind of how it started. And I kind of feel like I'm an entry level, because it's kind of you go to the site and it's kind of a meat and potatoes type of, forgive the language, meat and potatoes kind of website,
Yeah, but it makes sense to me, because one, it is who you are. And I always say that there's an authenticity that people can just see. They can always sense if somebody's putting on airs or putting on a show, trying to be somebody that they're not. And you are about as genuine as it comes. I knew that the second that I met you in Omaha at that event out there. And I was just like, holy smokes, I got to get this guy on the show. He's fantastic. And oh, by the way, he can talk sports with me too. Double bonus. But I love the name Shane and Simple. By the way, the blog is shaneandsimple.com. Absolutely fantastic. There's a link to it in the show description and in the episode notes. And I think that for us guys, man, there is still a lot of stigma surrounding this, even though, plant-based is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So to have a voice like yours out in the world is super important, which basically kind of like tells dudes like, bro, it's okay. Like, you don't have to check your man card here.
Yeah. And I think too, like, trying to bust that myth. And two, like, I believe this is the healthiest way to eat. It is medically the best way to eat. I will never be convinced otherwise. I have no desire to go back to animal products. it's not appealing. It doesn't satiate. It doesn't satisfy. But I also tell people, like, this is not about perfection. It's like Dr. Greger says, it's about progress, not perfection. And I've always loved that, because I think a lot of people feel like they're ostracized from a plant-based community or vegan community if they can't just be all in all the time. And I tell people, it's okay. Give yourself grace. There's going to be moments of falling off the wagon, but your journey's not over. Like, you're writing a story. Everyone has a story, and my story is not your story, and their story is not his story. It's like, everybody has a story, and use that and realize that. And so, but yeah, I mean, it's like, dude, I love food more now than I ever have. And it's like, and I tell people this, as far as dudes go, like, I think 90% of my followers are women, and that's just terrible. Like, I'm glad, I'm thankful, but it's like, dudes have got to get on board, man. It's like, well, I don't know.
That's just funny. Terrible. Like, it's just the way you said it, man. You're being you, and it just makes me laugh, bro. It just makes me laugh.
That's why I tried to catch myself. That sounded terrible. I'm thankful that women are my followers, because, I mean, the support is great. What I mean is, it's just sad that more dudes are not coming to the table on this.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's like, it's more manly to be able to walk to a cookout with your smoked tofu and take a ribbing and going, yeah, I'm totally cool with this. I get ribbed all the time in the little town I live in, but I'm like, well, you're the one that's had bypass surgery, not me. Hey, and like, so do with that what you will. But it's like, I'm going to go over and slice my tofu. I'm going to eat my sandwich. I'm going to let y'all rib. I'm going to enjoy it. Y'all are going to go to bed with a gut ache. I'm going to go home and know that my blood pressure didn't go up. So
you're feeling
and
good,
I'm going to
man.
enjoy so I think, it's more of a man to walk into that and take the ribbing than it is to just.
I think so too. Take the ribbon, develop a backbone. I mean, like, I think that kind of masculinity, the stereotypical sense, is like, I'm a man. I'm going to do what I want. Damn it. And that's kind of what you're doing. You're not conforming. I think, that conforming to things and ribbing somebody because of the fact that they are different and they're outside the box, like, that's actually kind of a cowardly thing to do, which makes you less of a man, right? Man
Absolutely.
is bravery if you think of it in those terms. So, hey, man, I'm right there with you. But we got to wrap things up. And so I got to circle back to the bread book here again. We've got Baking Vegan Bread at Home that is out now on Amazon. What's the favorite recipe that you have in there? What's your go-to? Is it the banana bread?
No, it's not the banana bread. It is by far, I think, and this is unanimous across the board with the family, it is this island coconut pineapple bread.
Ooh, that sounds exotic.
Dude, it is like a pina colada in loaf form. That's the only way I know to describe it. It makes the house smell so freaking good. I mean, it is just phenomenal. So that by far is probably the favorite one.
So if you like pina coladas, get the book. That's what you're saying, right?
That's what we're saying. But man, you've got pizza pull-apart bread, cranberry orange bread, sweet potato bread, no knead bread, French baguettes.
Ooh la la.
Yeah, dude. I mean, well, the subtitle is, it's Baking Vegan Bread at Home, beautiful everyday and artisan plant-based bread. So there's Swedish braided bread in here, challah bread. Oh, did you ever eat the lemon loaf at Starbucks? Do you remember that?
Oh yeah, back in the day I would. Absolutely.
Right there, boy. Vegan all day, buddy. Right there.
Bro. Okay. Vegan indulgences.
I want to take a picture of that. But I mean, dude, I've tried to, but there's like braided bread in there and challah bread. And I mean, we ate more, challah. We ate more than our share of bread making this book. I had a friend come by one day, and I think Andre and I, like, pushing towards the end of the book, my wife took off time for her work and spent 10 hours in the kitchen baking. She would bake and I'd go bake and shoot. And we go, what are we going to do with when you bake 8 loaves of bread what are you going to do with all this? So we called a buddy and said, "Hey, we just handed him a grocery set. Take this and go home." Like, so we had to
Awesome.
give a lot of it away. So
Awesome. Awesome. There's only so much bread that a man can consume or a man and his family can consume. Sometimes you just need to give it back to the community.
you do.
But a funny thing, if you hop on Amazon and you punch in your name, you're looking for the Baking Vegan Bread at Home book. Another book also pops up called the Vegan Bread Machine Cookbook. That's available now for pre-sale. I believe it's going to be out this fall. So we're kind of taking more bread recipes and specifically
Yes.
tailoring them for bread machines, as the title suggests.
Yes. And I got to tell you, I almost feel guilty with this book because it's just, you follow the instructions, throw it in a bread machine, and it's just, I have never used a bread machine until I started this book. And towards the end, they offered me, said, "Hey, we noticed, we've looked on the New York Times, we cannot find a vegan bread machine cookbook, and bread machines are kind of the rage right now. Do you want to do it?" And I was glutton for punishment. Like, yeah, I got stressed out on the last one. Let's do this one. So I went right from finishing the last one and probably had a week or two, and then started this one, and I'm a month behind. And actually, when we get done, I'm going to be shooting recipes and baking again. But dude, I got to tell you, I think I enjoyed this one. I don't know that I'll ever bake bread in the oven again, to be honest with you, and that's kind of sad. But this is, I mean, I've made Cajun bread. I made a chocolate cake. I made cornbread. I mean, I've made English muffin bread. I mean, it is, and everything has just been. It's magic. So yes, it's a bread machine, vegan bread machine cookbook.
All right, coming out this fall. Listen, your holiday shopping list is already starting to fill up with that book. All right, so start there, my friends.
That's
Start
exactly
there.
right.
We've got links to both books right now in the episode notes. One click, get the one today, and then pre-order the Vegan Bread Machine Cookbook that'll be out this fall, just in time for the holidays. I'm assuming that there's going to be some amazing kind of dessert-type breads in there as well, Shane. That would be great for a holiday party or two.
Yes, there are. There's a babka recipe that's in there.
There it is.
Cinnamon swirl bread. So there's a few dessert breads. Definitely some more heartier holiday breads. But in the vegan bread book, there are several sweet breads that would be great for the holidays. Cranberry orange bread, the banana bread, sweet potato bread. Great to make and give away. Food gifts are incredible to give away. So you can make a loaf, wrap it up, give it as a gift. You've spent 89 cents as opposed to fretting over what to give them. And world peace and gift giving can be solved with 89 cents worth of ingredients. So.
And since we're talking about holiday gifts and bread, I'm just going to plant the seed with you. The Shane and Simple Bread of the Month Club. I'm just saying.
Wow.
Huh? It's the gift that keeps giving, Shane. It's the gift that keeps on giving.
It does. It does. That it is, Clark. That it is.
You got the reference. I love it. Well played. That's why I love you, man. We got to end on the high note. He knew it was the Griswolds. You are the man, Shane Martin, man. This has been a great, great hour. Thank you, my friend.
It has been a blast, Chuck. It's so good to catch up since Omaha, man.
You're the best. Shane Martin, go ahead and pick up your copy of the books. Check them out online. Facebook, Instagram, everywhere. Shane and Simple Cooking, and also shaneandsimple.com. Shane Martin, appreciate you, bud.
You too, brother.